Salaam Nerds is brought to you by halalshirts.com, where you can find fun novelty gifts for your Muslim friends. While you're at it, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel. Yo, Salaam Nerds! It's your boy Neebs, aka Watch with Neebs, and I'm here with my co-host Jazz, aka Jazzarachi. Like Karachi.
As a Karachi
Jazzarachi?
boy, I appreciate that so much, man.
Yeah, you like that, right?
I was born at Sindh Medical College, and so, I am from Karachi. I moved here at 6 months. Fun fact, I popped out a month early, and my mom was in Karachi for her sister's wedding. So I totally fucked up.
Wow. Way to ruin a wedding, bro.
Straight up, I did.
You were born a wedding crasher. So, how old were you when you came to America?
I was 6 months. My parents.
You came to America 6 months?
Yeah, my parents lived here, right? My dad's been here since the 80s, so.
You're like a little phoblet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my dad came here for college. He went to the University of Houston, just like I did. Go Cougs. But my mom actually came here after she got married to my dad, and so it's weird because I'm like half first gen and half immigrant. So
yeah,
it's a weird place to be. And then
you're like a half gen immigrant.
Mm-hmm. I'm in between two generations.
Very cool.
Yeah, but
Very cool.
Yeah, I came here 6 months because we had to wait for my vaccines and all that to kick in. So.
All right.
So unfortunately, I can't be president here, which would be really cool, but I can do almost everything else.
Oh no! Well, you know what? I would still vote for you.
I appreciate it.
Yes, but let's get into the real guest of honor today, and that is our guest host, Mariam, who is a board-certified analyst, who is a doctorate candidate, and who is doing a dissertation on intergenerational trauma with the partition. And one of the big themes for today's episode was the partition. And honestly, so usually I have an idea of where I want the show to go. I made no plan. I made no sketch, no nothing. We're going to see it where it goes, man. We're going to see that there might be some tears. There might be, who knows where it's going to go. I'm scared. I don't know. Like, throw it away. Like, I don't know.
No, that's fair, because even last night, when we were watching Miss Marvel, right, we talked about this in the last episode where at the end, right, where they showed the trains, I felt that, man. Like, I was like, oh, this is loss. Like, they're losing everything. They're risking everything to get on this last train just to make it to a land where, unfortunately, the British totally screwed up. And so,
yeah.
I felt conflicted. I felt anger. I felt sadness. I'm like, this shouldn't happen. This shouldn't be happening. And I wish I could stop it almost.
Yeah. And like what people don't realize is that the reason it's so scary, it's not just because they have to leave, but like when they stay, there was a power vacuum left by the British, and these local extremists would gather around and they would kill people, and so like they really had to fear for their lives, and they're like little kids going like, "Are we going to be able to get on the train?" Like, it's sad, bro. It's really
that
sad.
Line hit me. I was like, oh.
Like when I was doing research for my dissertation, it's like you read the stats and you read about it. Like you read like, okay, close to 2 million people lost their lives in this, and you hear about, okay, there are blood trains, but then when you see it, right? And I think they did a really good job of visualizing it, right? It wasn't romanticized. It didn't look brave. It didn't look like empowered. It looked devastating, And I feel like when you see it, and I mean, obviously that wasn't real. That was just for the show, but like I think they did a good job of showing like. And you're right, it does show up a kind of emotion. It humanizes it, right? When you don't feel those emotions when you're just reading stats about an event, right?
Yeah.
You actually see it. You hear that little kid talking, and you hear the confusion and how frantic people are in their voices. Like it does hit differently.
So majority of our audience, despite the name Salaam Nerds, is actually not Muslim or Pakistani. Could you explain what a blood train is?
Yeah. So during the partition of India and Pakistan, they kind of talked a little bit about that in the show, but basically what happened, it happened quickly, right? It was the British leaving the country, pulling out very suddenly. civil wars on the verge of breaking out in the country. People were pissed. There was tension. So very quickly, almost overnight, they decided we're separating the countries, right? We're going to draw this kind of arbitrary line by some white dude. As they mentioned in the show, this white guy basically came and destroyed everything. And, there was no internet. There was no communication. Like, people found out about this. It's like word of mouth, and there was mass confusion. And so all people knew was our village is going to be destroyed. They're coming for the Muslims, or they're coming for the Hindus, or they're coming for whatever. Get out of here. So people were just going to scramble on whatever train they could get on to get to what part of the area they're supposed to be in, right? So Muslims leaving India, Hindus leaving Pakistan, and going on the other side. There was not enough trains, and there was not enough room on the train, so people were climbing on top, trying to get wherever they want. And as these trains were pulling in to the destinations, they would arrive dripping with blood, because they would be looted and attacked on the way, and they would just basically kill everybody on board. So they would arrive often with almost no survivors and just dripping blood everywhere. So they call them blood trains. Yeah, and there's stories, there's accounts of like children being saved by, the parents basically laying on top of them so they couldn't get killed. It's traumatizing, and people who are now in their 70s and 80s can remember, like, when I was 3 years old and this happened.
Yeah, it's crazy because they're still alive, essentially.
Yeah, a lot of them are.
Many of them are, yeah.
It's very, and it explains why there's so much tension with the countries, right? Because like a lot of the people who are politicians right now are children of people who literally went through this, right? And they passed down their trauma, they passed down their pain, and they've unfortunately passed down their hatred. And and a lot of the policies that are in effect are the direct result of that.
It's really complicated too, because before the partition, right, when it was just India, and so the British came, and at first people were like, oh cool, these people have like technology and they have stuff and they're giving us jobs, and they were kind of like, okay, this isn't too bad. Almost in a way allowed the colonization, because they didn't really know where it was going, and they thought they're getting something out of it. And then when they realized they were in it, they're like, oh, this kind of sucks. We're not really a fan, they're kind of taking over. But what the British were really good at was like this divide and conquer, right? And they're also very good at othering. So before the British came in, there was no sense of the other. We were all Indian, regardless of religion. And religion was not a dominant part of identity in India before the British. But when the British came in, they're like, oh, hey, those Muslim guys over there, oh, hey, those Hindu guys over there, really starting to build this kind of wedge and division within the country. Because that's how they maintain power, right? Is by dividing the masses. So that really kind of put a focus on religion as an important piece of identity, which didn't exist before. So even though there was talk about we need our own land, our own country, Pakistanis as Muslims, I mean, it wasn't supposed to be a Muslim country, right? Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted a secular country. He wanted a secular country. He wanted a place where wherever you are, you go there and you be whoever you are, right? Yep. That was his vision. And you're right.
That's what the white in the Pakistan flag stands for. Yeah, it's for all the minorities.
Right. Knowing that it was going to be a Muslim majority, but it was never supposed to be a Muslim-ruled country, right? But you're right about the rise of nationalism, right? So the following generation after the partition, it was almost viewed like this. Like, we just went through hell. This was horrible. This was like next level torture. This is, we just went through all this for what? This better be worth something. We better be fighting for something, right? So that trauma this mass collective trauma that people went through kind of gave birth to this nationalism where what are we fighting for? What did we lose all this for? Right? It couldn't have been for nothing. And so this created, it's like they almost needed something to blame, right? Like, so now we've been othered. Now our difference in religion has been pointed out to us. Okay, that can be our cause. That's what we're going to fight for. And that's what we see now between Pakistan and India. culturally we're so similar, right? But it's that religious difference and political views and, that stuff. But that's really the driving force, is that religious difference. But wasn't supposed to even be there to begin with.
Yeah. No, they put in a lot of rules and stuff. Like Muslims would vote for only Muslim candidates, and Hindus would only vote for Hindus. But then, like, Muslims would always, be in a situation where they're oppressed, right? And they created an environment where they made it almost impossible to coexist in any kind of, like, this time period. And the partition, something that people might be getting confused about, the partition isn't something the British forced on us. They created an environment where we felt it was necessary, but Muslim people basically wanted a partition. They felt it was the division was too big to fix, and that's why they did it. And what these people did, I think his name was Radcliffe. I think Radcliffe is the name of the guy who drew up the line. He had no experience. He didn't know anything about the region. He knew nothing about borders. He knew nothing about ethnicities. And he kind of just like, he used like all outdated maps too. Yep. And pretty much just like,
drew a line.
Leroy Jenkins. I'm just going to wing it. Like, see what happens, right? Yeah. And like for example, like Lahore is like half of Punjab. Like half of the people on the other side of Lahore are identical, and they're pretty much just like cut in half. And it's really a difficult situation because and this is what Sana, who is Kamal's mom, says. She says, I have a Pakistani passport, but my roots are in India, and and then between us is a border filled with blood. And this border was basically drawn up by Englishmen, right? And like, that's what she's talking about, the border and how crazy it was. And you can see she was a child, but she probably still holds a lot of trauma from that time period.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things you touched on there. So the border, right? So absolutely arbitrary line. And their goal was, okay, we get the Muslim majority on the side, Hindu majority on the side, but the line literally went through villages. There are people who woke up in the morning and they're like, my neighbor next door is in India and I'm in Pakistan. Like, yes, it was literally going through villages. It was cutting, and that part of the world, we're regional, right? So there's different languages, there's different customs, and you're cutting one village who might not have anything in common with the next. They're now cut off from everything they know. Yep. The other big thing is, people did not know what was going on. All they knew is they had to flee. All they saw was, oh, people are getting killed. I need to get out of here. People thought they could go back. They did not realize this was a permanent thing, right? So when Sana is talking about, I'm Indian, I have a Pakistani passport, there's accounts of real people who would say, now, 60 years later, talk about pre-partition calling that home. So back when I used to live at home, they can't even refer to where they've lived for the past 60 years as home. Because when you talk about trauma is essentially part of your brain, it's distorted time, right? Mm-hmm. So our minds are temporal. We follow a timeline where we can talk about past, present, future. Trauma is an experience that you're not able to see as part of the past. You haven't received closure around that. It's not temporally related to the rest of your experience. So you can't get over it because you're still stuck in it. That makes sense.
Wow. I've never heard it explained that way before. Yeah. That is
kind of
so
psychodynamic approach to it, that it is your brain unable to process the passage of time. So there's temporal confusion in this experience you're having. So that's what you see with people. They literally talk about it like, when I go back home, it's like, so 6 years ago, you're not going back home. This is your home now. Yeah. People cannot, it's not that they're being stubborn. It's like they really cannot, their mind cannot accept that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you left in a hurry, you know what's going on. There was no closure around, okay, goodbye home, I'll never see you again. It's like, no, we have no idea. Maybe we'll go back in a year. Maybe we'll go back 6 months. Maybe never, right? They didn't know. And so there's also stories of people who had moved and they've named streets after where they used to live, or stores after a street they used to live on, trying to bring part of that, you know, past with them. But then it's like, does that help or make it worse? You know, I mean, I don't know. But it's an indication of the trauma they're experiencing, where they never got that closure. They never got that, you know, it wasn't that they left on their own by choice either, right? So when you're forced to do something, there's something missing there.
Yeah.
And that also happens with a lot of our parents. Like, you know, my mom, she got married and moved to America, right? She is still stuck in 1989 Karachi. And she just cannot get past it, and no matter how much I try. And so even beyond just, you know, the partition, this is going to exist anywhere where people are forced to just pick up and leave for whatever reason.
But I think there's also the intergenerational component there too, right? So like when we talk about intergenerational trauma, it's trauma being carried across generations, even if you didn't experience it, right? So none of us experienced a partition. We're all touched by it. We're all impacted by it. Like Jazz, when you were saying you were getting emotional watching that scene, there's a part of you that's very connected emotionally to that, right? And so intergenerational trauma can be passed on different ways. So one way is epigenetics. So epigenetics is literally changing your DNA. So
yes, I heard about this.
Yeah.
They talked about how our bodies store fat very differently because of the famine that we've gone through from the 10 British.
Famines we've gone through.
Yeah. It literally changed our DNA. That's so wild.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways where our DNA can be changed, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. Like we're still learning more about like how that happens and why that happens. And I'm not an expert at epigenetics, but trauma does change that person who went that trauma's genetics, and that change in genetics can get passed down. And it can even, I believe, be triggered in later generations, even if it wasn't changed in previous ones. So that's one way. Then there's also a difference in our parenting. And this was touched on in the show too, like when Muniba and Sana are having that kind of mom and daughter talk, right? And Sana was like, you ran away from me. And Muniba was like, no, I didn't run away from you. I ran away from people saying things about you. And it was hard for me, and you were never there as a mother for me. So I thought that was really interesting when she said you were never there as the mother I needed. Because if you think about trauma, right? So Sana, she was in those trains. She went through that partition, right? She had a lot of baggage and unresolved trauma in her own life. And then you have a kid. Like, I have 2 kids. You have to be like totally on it. Like, you cannot be distracted by anything. You have to be giving it 110% of your attention. Now imagine if you have such a traumatic history that you don't even have resolved, and you're supposed to be providing for this child and meeting all of their needs. So a really common thing in Pakistani families is poor attachment to parents. So poor parental relations, poor parental guidance, poor parental involvement. And part of that has to do with our trauma background. When we have so much unresolved stuff in our own lives, how can we be so present as a parent when we're dealing with our own stuff, right? And that's what we see with Sana Muniba. Sana was dealing with a lot of stuff. She probably wanted to be there as a mother and wasn't able to because she just had too much other stuff going on. And when you think... Sorry, go ahead.
Do you think that Muniba, after experiencing that, did the complete opposite and started like paying more attention to Kamala and over-parenting her?
Yes,
is that something that happens too?
That does happen. That does happen. It's like, you know, it's like I do this to my kids too, right? Like, oh, I never had this, or my parents never did this to me. I'm going to make sure I do that for my kids, right? You're compensating. Yeah. But there's part of that, and there's also a fear of loss, right? So Muniba kind of felt compelled to have to leave home for whatever reason. She lost that bond with her mother. So there's this fear of loss, I think, that's present with her and Kamala. And not just that, but just the fear of my kid growing up in a different culture. It's so different from my culture. Is she going to lose her culture? And that is a huge part of our trauma history that we see in, you know, our generation where we're born and raised here. Our parents are terrified we're going to lose that culture. Why? Because they did. right? When the partition happened, they lost their culture.
Wow.
They moved next door, but it's a different culture, right? They had to start over with nothing. People lost their money. People lost their identity in society. People lost everything. So they're desperately holding on because they felt that loss.
Wow.
Damn.
I never. Do we need to pay you for this session? I feel like I just had a breakthrough. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. And once you realize your parents all have trauma, you start treating them differently. And
Yeah. I mean, they're human, right? We all have our limitations. And I mean, trust me, I grew up here. I've had my fair share of fights with my parents, and I still do to this day. But like, when I think about, they dropped their lives and they moved across the world. There was no internet. Like, I still can't get over. Like, I can't even like go down the street with no internet, right? Like,
no, like they used to write letters. They would write letters back home. It's so wild,
right? And so to do all that with no guidance, no idea how, and yeah, I mean, like, they didn't do everything perfectly, but I think they did the best they could given what they had. You know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I don't know what to say. I never thought about it that way. That's so crazy. Like, like, you want to do these things and be like everyone else, right? You want to be like American. You want to be doing what everyone else is doing. And you're like, Mom, Dad, like, get over it. Like, what's the big deal, right? And then, like, no, it makes sense.
Yeah, we didn't have the trauma.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and a lot of them come from a generation, like my own grandparents, as an example. My grandmother was an orphan.
Oh wow!
And so she didn't have a mother figure, right? And didn't really know how to be a good mother. And so my dad is very weird about emotional stuff, right? Because he didn't have a good role model for how to be that person. But at the same time, he's also very involved. I wouldn't say helicopter parent, but more involved than his parents were. And then there's me, who's like, I went to the extreme. I'm like, there is no emotion in my family. I'm going to become a psychologist. You know? So it's, I mean, these patterns in our own family histories, they do impact how we do things. So whether we see it or not, it's there.
We all need therapy.
We all need therapy, yeah.
Yeah, man. The U.S. needs to do a better job with providing better access to healthcare and and mental health, because this is crazy. But like, I feel like for generations we haven't stopped moving. Like, our parents moved from like India to Pakistan, then from Pakistan to America, and now we're moving from like, you know, from New Jersey
America to
like
Canada.
Dallas.
My sister's thinking about that.
Canada.
We're thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I know. And like, when does this stop, man? Like, it's crazy.
Well, I think the difference is we might be the first generation where we weren't forced to move.
Yeah.
Like, we have the luxury now deciding, right? And we've had the luxury to do a lot of things our parents, our grandparents didn't get to do. Like, we had the luxury to sit here and talk about mental health.
Yeah.
I know.
We did not. Yeah, that's true.
It's definitely a privilege. Like, our ability to, you know, have some kind of self-discovery only comes from them having to be in survival mode for most of their lives. Yeah. Definitely something we shouldn't take for granted.
Yeah.
It is crazy. But, you know,
there are going to be a lot of people listening to this podcast tomorrow morning and be like, all day at work, they're going to be thinking about this.
Yeah, man.
Call your parents, tell them you love them.
But like, I feel like some of this stuff is not even that recent, right? Like, let's think about Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan, like that train, the scene with everybody hanging on the train, not that different than everybody hanging on those planes, man. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah, I mean, it's the same level of desperation, right? It's the same level of desperation there.
Right? The people clinging onto those trains are feeling the same way that those Afghans were clinging on to those like planes, man. It's just, I don't know. It's heartbreaking, man. It sucks that we could be in such a cruel world.
Yeah.
You know, it's sad. But
and it all started with the British.
Mm-hmm.
Yo, why'd he be holding us down, man?
For real. For real.
I mean, we could do a whole other talk on colonization too. I mean, what I think is really, really fascinating about that is like, there's this like deep-rooted animosity we had towards the British, right? Like,
yeah,
like right? We all feel that, right? But at the same time, we still kind of idolize them, right?
We do.
No,
right?
Like Queen Elizabeth, like she was the queen when all this happened, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, she was.
Like,
she was alive then. She was the queen. And every time we're at the Olympics, she just stares out into the field and looks at all the countries she's lost.
Basically.
But
I have a lot of
Pakistani
animosity toward her.
Yo, I know. Not Princess Di though. She's the exception.
Oh yeah.
You're right. She's the exception. Correct.
She was a
and
real
Meghan
one.
Markle. She's awesome.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. No, but lighter skin being seen as the more beautiful, right?
Oh,
British.
let's do it. Colorism.
Yeah,
let's go. Let's go. Let's talk about colorism. Me and Jazz, we know what's up.
Yeah,
but
you see how dark I am? This light is lying to you.
My sister's very light-skinned, and whenever I go to Pakistan, my family is like, "Oh, Shama, you look so beautiful." Mariam, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Like, nice to see you too. But you know, it's like we hate the British, but at the same time, we still kind of are like want to be them as a culture.
Yeah.
You know.
I refuse.
You know what's interesting? So in this episode, right, the cousins of Kamala have a different accent than Kareem's friends, and they have a very like Britishy, fake British accent. It's like this weird Pakistani trying to be British accent, whereas like Kareem's friends just had a regular Pakistani accent. Because like they're privileged and they go to these British schools and they want to be more like the British.
Yeah, that's still seen as we're still living with that. You know, it's like generations of being brainwashed, right? If we're still living with this, that the ideal, like you've reached societal class when you can imitate the British, the accent, the skin color, all those things, right? The sports, whatever. It's like that's the ideal, even though they destroyed the entire region.
Yeah. Not sports though, because they suck at the sports that they invented themselves. We constantly kick their ass in cricket, and like other countries beat them in soccer.
Field hockey, everything. Yeah, hell yeah.
How did we let this tiny island do all this much damage? They can't even play sports.
I know.
How are they going to conquer the whole world just for spice, only to never eat spice again?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Too.
I really do hate the British. Me taking shots at them all day.
I know. Well, look, Americans hate the British too, though. Americans take shots at them also. But then again,
they colonized us. I mean, I think we've earned it.
Yeah, man. It's like honestly, this is why I'm pretty sure that like ghosts are not real. Because if ghosts were real, every white person in this entire world will be haunted for the rest of their life.
Got that right.
I believe it. Yeah.
I want to be a ghost now. Just haunt everybody.
I'm gonna come back and haunt colonizers.
And their descendants until they apologize. Yeah. And specifically, the people at the museums in Britain. It's still an active crime scene as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, give us back our diamonds and our artifacts. But yeah, the skin tone thing too, man. Like, do you think, how many generations do you think it'll take for us to just get over that?
It's ending with mine. It ends with me.
But that's like on an individual level. I'm talking more about like society level, right? Because even as America claims it's like, you know, super cool. There's colorism in America too, right?
Oh, for
and
sure.
Pakistan is so far behind, and India is so far behind the colorism thing that like America, like we're probably not going to get past it until like America gets past it, right?
Well,
like,
I think it means something different too, though, right? Like in Pakistan, the way I see it, it really becomes a reflection of like your class, your position in society, right? Your level of privilege. It's not just a beauty standard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So are people going to give that up, right? Like, are people going to say, I'll give up my class and my prestige? And, you know, Pakistan's a very, you know, where you are in the class kind of system is really important there, right?
Very
so
true.
Are people going to give that up? Are people
No.
going to say, no, I don't think so. I mean, I know people of our generation who are very obsessed with their skin color. They never go
I have some friends like that. You know, they are my age. They're obsessed with being white, and I'm like, I do not care.
It's hard to get rid of that.
Mm-hmm.
No, very true. Oh man, this is heavy stuff, man. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up? This was very informative. Like, there's something that you said, I was like, whoa. It's crazy how this like little show is opening up doors to talk about things like the partition, generational trauma, and class privilege. It's cool. I like that these conversations that are coming out from this tiny little MCU show, the little engine that could, man, is chugging along. Like, it's such a great show. It doesn't have enough viewers. We need to like tell everybody to go watch it because this show is incredible.
Like, share, subscribe, comments.
I just tell my friends, I'm like, you need to watch the show. It's so good. But Neebs, there's one thing that you and I were talking about before we started recording, and it was about just the fact that we're able to sit here and talk about this, right? Like, we talk about if this show came out 20, 30 years ago, like, we're far enough removed from the actual events that happened during the partition where we're at a place now we can talk about it. It was trauma. It was horrible. It was the largest mass migration in the entire world ever.
Yeah, and not only did like people die, but people went missing that people never found ever again.
Yeah.
No, there was no way to find them. Like they could still have like found new families and just completely lives, or just disappeared from the face of the earth. And I highly recommend. There's a TV show called Doctor Who. It's like the 13th Doctor, no, the 14th Doctor episode. It's the episode called The Demons of Punjab, and it's literally about all of the people that have gone missing in the partition. And it's literally exactly what you said. Like, lines were drawn literally through people's houses, through villages, and people who were like, friends and neighbors and like, ristadars were enemies the next day. And it's crazy. The show does a really great job at painting that picture. I highly recommend Doctor Who, The Demons of Punjab. Great episode.
I mean, I think, the show obviously kind of glosses over like the really traumatic things that happened, but there were women who were killing themselves, or their brothers or fathers would, because like a Muslim woman might get stolen by a Hindu, forced to convert, marry them. And then after the partition, Pakistan and India both made their separate bureaus of basically finding lost women. Mm-hmm. So this woman would finally have accepted her new life, adjusted, had kids, whatever. They would steal her back.
God
so
damn.
She's traumatized again.
Wow.
Yeah. And then these
the kids.
Oh,
no.
Yeah, they're kind of like, I don't know, where do they go now? They don't have a mom now, right? So like there's so many levels of just like effed up stuff. And so, the people have been trying to research this for such a long time. And the problem was nobody would talk about it. All these people who survived the partition, nobody would talk about it. And to this day, people, in our culture, like, you don't talk about emotional stuff. You don't talk about hard things, right? People are finally now getting comfortable talking about it. And, we talk about trauma being generational and being inherited. The way to stop it is to talk about it and to change our patterns.
Yeah.
Stop the pattern. Like Jazz, you were saying, this is ending with me. Like the color is ending with me.
Right.
That's the cure for it, right? So now that we're able to have these conversations around it, and we can point out, this weird thing, like this helicopter parenting, where did this come from? Oh, it came from our sense of loss, right? Mm-hmm. Now we can resolve that because we know why that happened. And we can take the steps to remediate that and think about, is this a functional behavior we're having, or was this functional at some point as a coping behavior?
Yeah.
And now we don't need that coping behavior anymore. When you don't need a coping behavior anymore, it goes from functional to dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And so now we got to reverse all these dysfunctional behaviors we picked up in our culture, and that's how we undo this trauma.
Yeah. Everyone needs therapy.
Yes. The name of this episode, everyone needs therapy.
I do want to say one thing, something that you brought up, like, we weren't ready to talk about it. And that's because, like, for the longest time, the reason it was so difficult to talk about was not only, like, the trauma that you went through, but it was also, like, people were more focused on who to blame than to actually heal, right? It's like, well, all these Muslims did this, but then all these Hindus did this. And, like, once we go away from the, like, the oppression Olympics or the, trauma Olympics, like, that's the only time that we can have a conversation and find out how to heal, because it's not helping anybody. Because if this many people died and a few more people died from this demographic, who does that help? It doesn't help anybody.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's still people out there for blaming each other, but, like, if we want to be the ones who are, like, instilling that change, like, that, you're right. It doesn't, you can't move forward by, like, saying he did this or she did this, whatever,
Yeah. But yeah, man. Very, very difficult subject. We're at the end of our episode. Any closing thoughts? Mariam, you want to go first?
I mean, I was just really impressed with where the direction the show is going, and, like, it's such an entertaining show and a fun show, but they're able to kind of put in this really, like, heavy and serious kind of stuff that's happened. So I think it's really cool that they've done that and bringing light to that and making people aware of whether a history they're not, familiar with, or their own history, So I love that about it.
Very cool. What about you, Jazz?
I'm traumatized right now. I'm processing.
Are we trauma bonding? Are we all trauma bonding?
We are trauma bonding. Yes, that is the phrase.
Oh man. No, this was a very informative episode. I hope people get a lot out of it. I dread editing this episode because I'm probably going to cry halfway through.
It's okay, man. It's okay.
It's really sad, man. And I do have, like, a newfound appreciation for my parents, and it's tough, man. You see Muniba talking to her mom and Kamala and their relationship. Like, we have to understand, like, this might be a superhero show, but the heart of the show is these mothers and daughters and their relationship. That's the biggest part of the show. Like, you take away the superpowers, it's still the show. The show is still there, and people don't realize that. And I have, like, I think, like, this show, when Miss Marvel finally takes her name Miss Marvel, it's not even going to be in reference to Carol Danvers. It's probably going to be like her mom getting Carol Danvers' name wrong and accidentally calling her Miss Marvel, and she takes her name because her mom calls it that, right? Like, I feel like the relationship between the mom is my thing that I'm looking forward to the most. I'm looking forward to the healing. I don't care when she gets her suit. I don't care when she gets her powers. I just want Muniba and, like, Kamala to have, like, a good, healthy relationship. I'm so invested in these family. I don't know why.
Hey, I told you day one, man. Muniba Auntie is going to be the MVP of the show.
It resonates with us, like, this is a family on TV that, like, us as Pakistani Americans can really relate to, Like, we've all had those kind of interactions with our own parents or had those struggles as teenagers, whatever.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Well, thank you.
That was a great therapy session. See you all next week.
That was a great therapy session. My insurance is Blue Cross Blue Shield. Just send them a bill.
Yep.
Yeah, I have Oscar's individual from Obamacare.
Oh man, good luck for you, Jazz. I'm just hoping I hit my deductible. Oh man, no, thank you, Mariam, for having us on. We're probably going to bring you back because
for sure.
Because not only do we talk about trauma from generational trauma and partition, but we also do reality shows, and there's a lot of trauma there.
Would love to.
Maybe we'll bring you on to discuss The Bachelor or The Bachelorette.
Sure.
Oh boy,
I'll have to do some research.
Fun.
Oh man. Anyways, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. This was a fun session. Well, the first half was fun. The second half was educational. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. And until next time, guys, Salaam, nerds.